Hey there, interwebs, and welcome back to How Fascinating. The question I'd like to open with today is one which you've almost certainly heard before, and which I'd be happy to never hear again. It is, simply, if a tree falls in the forest and no one's around to hear it, does it make a noise? If I had asked if it makes a sound, the answer would be yes, obviously. Sound is merely mechanical energy in the form of pressure waves propagating through a medium such as air or the ground on which the tree landed. That's why in space no one can hear you scream timber. Sound doesn't travel in a vacuum. It travels out of the vacuum and annoys the hell out of the dog. Whether or not it makes a sound is not the question I asked, though. I specifically asked if it makes a noise, and the answer to that is heavily dependent on how you define noise. According to Merriam-Webster, noise is defined as a sound which lacks agreeable musical quality or is noticeably unpleasant. They also define it as any sound that is undesired or interferes with one's hearing of something. Just about any definition of noise you find will include some aspect of unpleasantness, and in order to be offensive to the senses, there must be someone around with senses to be offended. It seems to me that if no one's around to hear, a falling tree can't make noise. Or can it? What if a completely deaf person was there to witness the event? The fall would not be heard, but the pressure waves traveling through the ground and air could still be felt. And does the witness have to be a human? The aforementioned dog certainly finds the vacuum cleaner annoying. If no one's around to hear the tree fall, does that include all creatures able to hear? And if not, can they find the sound objectionable, therefore qualifying it as a noise? Or is the mere fact that it would annoy someone if they were around enough? Is the quality of being irritating inherent to the sound? Even if no one can see the tree's leaves, are they not still green? Is the same true for the sound of the fall, or do we imbue it with meaning? In the words of Johnny Vegas, quote, "If the tree fell down and there was no one around to see it fall, it should still be upright," unquote. This is a wonderful way of pointing out that it would be remarkably anthropocentric to argue that an event can't be said to have occurred if no one observed it, but that's not as absurd as it may sound, on a certain level. The quantum level, to be exact. Before we can continue to talk about trees, we have to talk about a cat. Schrodinger's cat, to be specific, which has frustratingly been used by ignoramuses to mean you won't know how something will turn out until you try. In brief, subatomic particles do not follow the laws of traditional Newtonian physics, the bloody contrarians. Photons, for example, behave both as waves in some cases and as particles in others. This makes things difficult to reconcile as you move from the particle scale to the macro scale. Schrodinger's cat is a thought experiment proposed by physicist Erwin Schrödinger, wherein a cat is sealed in a box with a vial of poisonous gas, some radioactive material that has a 50-50 chance of decaying, and a Geiger counter with a hammer that will smash the vial, releasing the gas and killing the cat if the material decays. The radioactive material doesn't conform to Newtonian physics, and thus its constituent particles can exist in a superposition of both decayed and not decayed, but the cat is just like any other cat and can't be both alive and dead, but it's probably happy in that box for the time being. The whole thing is meant to show that events on a quantum scale don't play nice with the macro scale, and trees, like cats, exist on a macro level and therefore can't be both fallen and standing. If we had a quantum-scale tree, however, it could exist in a superposition of both states, but observing it would cause it to collapse and enter one of those two states, emitting information like a falling tree emits energy. We're now entering the domain of Maxwell's demon, which is a different thought experiment, and the demon in question is essentially a mechanism or engine which converts information into energy. Trying to use particle physics, though, is starting to feel like a step too far to answer a question posed by an 18th century bishop, so let's get back to basics. George Berkeley, the guy who first proposed the question in 1710, was addressing the argument that because we do not perceive things which do not exist, things do not exist if no one perceives them. At its heart, the major crux of the argument is that we can't disprove claims about unobserved behavior. To do so would require evidence, at which point the behavior in question is being observed and the evidence is no longer applicable. Any claim made along these lines is scientifically unfalsifiable and therefore very annoying to debate. Because the physics of philosophy and vice versa are a step outside my usual wheelhouse, I decided to call on an expert for help. My girlfriend's brother is both a physics major and an active member of his university's philosophy society, and I kid you not, his name is Forrest with one R. You cannot make this stuff up, people. Anyway, I posed the question to him, and he assures me that from a physics point of view, a falling tree inarguably makes a sound when it falls, regardless of whether or not it's being observed. If one wants to get into the philosophy of it, there's no one right answer, and therefore more room for debate. If you ask me, it makes a sound, but not a noise, because noise is unpleasant, and what's pleasant is subjective. This all just supports my larger theory that the majority of philosophical conundra are caused by poorly defined starting conditions, sometimes intentionally so. This is why mathematicians are such sticklers for specificity. Next time you want to pose a rhetorical question, define your parameters, and then we'll talk. Until next time, thanks for watching, and have a fascinating day.